Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to start a new series today and kind of interweave it with some of the other series that I have going on. But this is going to be a shorter one, about an hour to an hour and a half total. We'll break it out over 4 or 5 episodes, so it's about 20 to 25 minutes per sitting. People have told me that you miss these kind of projects. This one will work with autocomplete in Google Places. We'll use Google Places to go get specific types of places. We'll use Google Maps. I did another series in Google Maps about a year ago. I've tried to keep the repo up to date with the changes, but there have been a lot of changes since, and so I think it's a good time to revisit that, build on those skills, and put together an app here. So this one will find you, so it's going to use Geolocator to find where you are. I'm not at the Googleplex, but my emulator is set to that. And then we have these options down at the bottom, and when you click on these, it's going to find the closest item of that category. So if I want to find the closest pet store to the Googleplex, it's way the heck out there. I bet a pharmacy is much closer to the Googleplex. And you can see the map is adapting to the distance. So if it's very far out, like with the campground, it's going to zoom back out so that that item is just inside the map. And if we want to go for a lawyer, we're going to zoom in quite a bit because there are apparently quite a few lawyers right near the Googleplex. We're going to use autocomplete up here to auto search. And so we can search by towns. And when we do that, the map is going to refocus itself on that particular town. And then we can do the same thing. We can find the nearest pet store, and it's going to pull back if it needs to show you where the nearest pet store is, and usually zoom in when you go for a bank. Yep, there we go. All right, so a lot of good skills in here. If you'd like to follow along, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so to get started here, I'm going to type create. Nope, Flutter Create. And I'm going to use a --org flag. You don't have to do that, but I'm just going to give it a domain name that is tied to my domain. And then I'll give it a name, and I'm going to call it Places _autocomplete. And I'm just recovering from a hard drive crash, and I don't have Visual Studio Code in my path, so I'm going to open it up over here and drag it in. All right, so there's my main.dart with the default app. So why don't we bring in the packages first? And I am going to use change notifier provider for state management. So if we visit pub.dev and we go to provider and we click on the installing tab, we get the current version here. So we can copy that and bring that into pubspec.yaml and paste it down below Cupertino icons. And the next dependency we're going to need is Geolocators. So when this app boots up, we want to focus in on wherever we are. For starters, just to have something on the screen. So we're going to go to Geolocator. And find the installing tab, find the latest version, and put that just below provider. We'll need HTTP because that's all Google Places is a REST API that we're going to hit, and so we'll use the HTTP package for that. So we'll grab that, we'll put that below Geolocator, and last thing we need is a package to work with Google Maps. And so I'm going to use Google Maps Flutter. And same deal, copy, paste, and we are all set with the packages. We'll hit save, Visual Studio Code will bring that in for us. Great. All right, next let's set up our permissions. And so we're going to want to start at our Google Cloud console. And so I have a project existing that I'm going to use for this, or you can set one up if you don't have one already. And what we're looking for is we want to enable the APIs for Android, for iOS, and then for the REST searches for Places. So over here on the hamburger menu, we have APIs and services, and the first one we want to go to is library. And usually Maps comes up first. If not, you can search it here. But we need to enable 3 APIs. So the first one we need to enable is Maps SDK for Android. So if we click on that card, it's going to say enable here if you haven't enabled it yet. It will say manage if you already have. We're just looking to see if this check mark with API enabled exists, and if not, enable it and make sure that it does. We want to do the same things for the Maps SDK for iOS. Okay, same deal. We want that API enabled. And then we also want the Places API. So on the Maps, I'm gonna click View All, and I think we'll find it pretty quickly. Yeah, right here, the Places API. You can also search it. Again, just want to make sure that that is enabled, or else our requests are going to be rejected at the server. All right, with those enabled, we'll be able to access them if we pass in the correct key. So we want to come back up here to APIs and services and go to credentials. And I have an API key. I'm going to create another one here just to show you how it's done. So we click on create credentials, we go to API key, and it's going to tell us, here's your API key. Do you want to restrict it? And we're going to go ahead and restrict it. So we'll click on this restrict key. And we'll leave this section open here. We won't restrict it by the protocol, but we will restrict it down here under API restrictions. So we'll go to restrict key. And what we'll do is we'll just enable the three that we just set up. So we want Maps SDK for Android, we want Maps SDK for iOS, and we want the Places API. All right, and with that, we can save it. And then we have an API key that we can use throughout this application. All right, so don't close that tab. We're going to have to refer back to that in just a second. So Google Maps is going to require some permissions, as is Geolocator. So if I go back to the Google Maps Flutter package, I can see on the README file that there is get the API key, we just did that, enable the SDK platform, we just did all of this. Then there's some permissions we need to do. So for Android, we need to grab this metadata here, copy it. We're going to come back into our application, and we're going to go into the Android application, and we're going to drill into app. We're going to drill into SRC. We're going to drill into main, and we're looking for this Android manifest.xml. And this goes inside the application. So right after metadata, Flutter embedding, but before we close the application, we can paste that in there. And we want to sub in the your key here with the key that we just created. So we just created this. I'm going to come and copy this, still keep it open because we're not done, but I'm going to paste that in there. And that's going to take care of Android for Maps. Don't close that manifest because we're going to come back to it. Now for iOS, we want to go to either the appdelegate.m or the appdelegate.swift. And if you've created this recently, it's going to be appdelegate.swift. You don't have to do this in Xcode. You can do it right here. You can just hit the fly down for iOS. We want to go into runner, and we're looking for appdelegate.swift. And we are looking to add this line right here, GMS services with your API key right after this Boolean and above the generated plugin registrant. And obviously we need to sub back in our API key. So we'll come back here again. I'll grab that. I'll paste it in. And make sure you don't miss this detail here where we import Google Maps. So it's right here. Make sure you get that. All right, and that is all set for Google Maps. We do have some requirements also for Geolocators, so let's go hit that. All right, and for Android, we need to make sure that our Gradle properties has these settings. If you are running a Flutter project that's been built in the last 6 months, you're all set. You don't need to worry about that. You can check that if you want. It does want us to set the compile version to 30, so I'm going to go into Android. I'm going to find my build Gradle in my app. And that's where we have this compile SDK version. I'm going to set that to 30. And then we want to pick one of these two permissions. And we actually want the find location. So you can get a course location or a find location permission. And we're going to get the find so we can get a little bit more accuracy. And so we copy that, and we, remember I told you not to close your Android manifest. So that is an app main. App src main if you did close it. But we want to paste that into the Android manifest, and that goes outside of the application. So like that. And then for iOS, we want to paste just these top two. We don't need the background location. So we're just going to take the top two. We just want the location when the application is in use. And so again, you don't need to open Xcode for this. You can go to iOS, you can go to Runner, you can go to Info plist, and drop it right before this closing DICT tag. So it's a key value pair. I'm just going to indent that. And that should be all set. Do keep this tab open because we're going to need it one more time. I don't know if we'll get to it in this episode, but we also need it for our Places service. So let's clean up our, I'm going to close this iOS, and let's clean up our main.dart file. So I just want to take out these comments here, just get rid of those. Just the big ones. And then everything from class my homepage down, let's just go ahead and get rid of that. I'll leave the app in the main.dart file. That's not best practice, but it's okay for this project. I'm going to create a new folder inside lib called src, so that'll be our source folder. And inside the src, I'm going to create another folder called screens. And then inside screens, I am going to create a home screen.dart. And this is going to be a stateful widget. So we're going to want to work with a stateful widget because we are going to introduce a map controller and we're going to need to dispose it. So I'm going to use stfl to create a stateful widget that I am going to call home screen. And we will use a material app in this one. So we'll bring in package, Flutter, material. All right, so that'll give us an error in our main file, and we just need to change our home page from the widget that we deleted to our home screen. And we should be all set there. So bouncing back to the home screen, let's just scaffold this out quickly. So let's give ourselves, instead of a container, let's give ourselves a scaffold. And I'm going to not use an app bar. I'm just going to jump right to a body. So no app bar in this one. And the body is going to be a list view. And we'll give it a children property. Let's drop my semicolon in there to get rid of the error. And so at the top is where we're going to have our search field. So we will use a text field for that. And then we'll drop in our Google Map. And we're going to stick our Google Map in a container. So let's do a container. Don't have to worry about width, but we do need to give it a height. And so let's say 300. And so the container will have a child, and the child will be the Google Maps. So let's bring that Google Map widget in. And let's just give it the minimum requirements so that we can see it on the screen and know that everything is working. So we'll do map type, and that'll be map type dot normal. So you can do satellite view, hybrid, whatever you want to do. You can do my location enabled. So that will put that blue dot wherever you are on the screen. And for initial camera position, so we need a camera position object. And you know what, let's just give this a set location to start, just so we can make sure things are working. Let's do Chicago latitude. All right, so we'll give it a target, which will be a lat LNG object. And that will take latitude and longitude comma separated. So we'll do 41.8781, and that's actually a negative in the northern hemisphere or western hemisphere. 87.6298. Just do it like that. All right, and it's my theory that if we run this now, we should get a map on the screen. Let's test that theory. All right, so there's my map, and we haven't introduced Geolocator yet, so if you're not getting a map on this screen, go ahead and check the permissions in the Flutter Google Maps package, just to make sure you've got everything correct there, because we haven't introduced Geolocator. So the only thing that could be wrong at this point is you haven't enabled the APIs here in the library, or you haven't set up permissions correctly, so you can double check those. And so the text field is kind of hard to see. It may be working. Let's give it a decoration just to confirm that it is there. So that would be an input decoration. And let's give it a hint text, and we'll say search location. Good. Now, you may get like a sync error the first time that you do a hot reload with Google Maps. Just go ahead and blast through it, and it should disappear after the first run through. I'm running this in Visual Studio Code. There was a way in IntelliJ to stop that kind of error from displaying. Doesn't seem to actually affect how the application runs, but something with hot reload is triggering it, at least with this version. So maybe you won't get it. But if you do, just see if you can blast through it and keep going. And if it clears up after that, you should be fine. All right, so before we wrap this one up, let's go ahead and put ourselves on the screen, have it figure out where we are, zoom in on the map. And so for that, I'm going to create a new folder in lib, and we're going to create a services folder. And inside of that services folder, I'm going to create a new Dart file, which is going to be my Geolocator service.dart file. And that's a class that we will call Geolocator service. And not too much in here. We just want to get a future back with a position object. And we'll call it get current location. It will be an async function, and we want to return the awaited value of Geolocator get current position, and we're going to pass in a desired accuracy value of location accuracy dot high. And we'll follow all of that up with a semicolon, and that should be all that we actually need in this service. We'll need a way of storing this information, so let's create ourselves a new folder in lib called blocks. And inside there, we'll create a new file, and for lack of a better name, I'm going to call it application_block.dart. And in there, we'll create a class called application block with change notifier. So we'll use that change notifier mix in to alert our UI to changes. I'm going to use this as the intermediary between the view and my services. So I'm going to bring in an instance of that Geolocator service that we just created. I'm going to set myself up a section for variables. And in here, I'm going to set a position variable for the current location. And so we'll listen to that with the UI. So that's going to be a position, which is part of the Geolocator package. That's what we're getting back from our Geolocator service, this position object, which has the coordinates within it. So that's what we're going to do. That's going to be our type, and we'll call it current location like that. And we're going to want that to fill when we first boot up the application. So let's create a function that gets our current location and sets it. So we'll call it set current location, and we'll make it asynchronous. And so we'll call our Geolocator service our get location like we just created here, get current position. And then we'll set that value we get equal to this current location variable. So current location is going to be equal to the awaited value of Geolocator service get current location. Like that. And at this point, we want to notify the listener. So that's going to tell our UI that there has been a change. And that's just part of the change notifier, which the change notifier provider will listen to. All right, now I said we wanted that to fire when we first booted up the application, and so we can set that inside the constructor because we're going to create one instance of the application block, which I actually want to be capital B there. And so when we create that instance at the very beginning of the application, that's when it's a good time to call that set position. So we'll do a constructor here, and in the constructor, we'll just call this function right there. And we don't need to await it or anything. We can't do that really in a constructor anyway. We're just going to call it and get it going, and then we will have the UI respond when it's ready. All right, so let's make sure that we have an instance of this block in our widget tree, and we can do that by coming out here to main.dart and just wrapping an instance of our material app with a change notifier provider and passing in an instance of the block we just created. So we need a context, and then we fat arrow it over to application block. All right, so let's just connect that all together. So let's go back to our screens folder and our home screen. And when we build, we want to bring in an instance of our block. So we can do that with a final, and we'll call it application block. And we'll set it equal to provider of context. And I'll just need to bring in provider. And specify that our type is an application block. Like that. Also need to bring in that. So that will give us access to our current location, and if that's been resolved, if that's done, then we want to show the map. And if it's not, then we actually don't want to show the map yet, because once we show the map and we pass it an initial camera position, we don't get a second shot at that. We can move it around to different camera positions, but we only get one shot at the initial camera position. So you don't want to build the map until you have that. And so we would want to attach on our body here a clause where we would check application block dot current location and check if it's equal to null. And then right up top where it is null, so we'll do a colon down here for when it is not null. We'll display that list view. But if it is, we'll center up a center with a child, and we'll do a circular progress indicator. So we'll just get a spinner. And down here in our lat and our lunge, we want us to replace that now with our current location. So we would say application block, current location, and we want the latitude. And then we also want to do application block, current location, longitude. And I didn't set a zoom property originally, so let's do that. Oh, I screwed that up. Oh, no, I didn't. So the lat, okay, that has to be the lat longitude is, so we find where that closes, we'll do a comma, and then we come down and do a zoom. And 14 is enough. That's why we're back here in outer space, is because we didn't actually zoom in. All right, so if we save that, and we will need to do a hot restart, because we've got a stateful widget to trigger all that. Okay, we're going to get asked for permission to allow the app to know where we are. So we say allow. All right, and so now we are Googling, or now we are zooming in on the Googleplex here. And if you're on Android, this is simply responding to your location here. So you could move this around if you wanted to in that case. If you're on an actual device, then it should be looking right down upon you, rather creepy like. All right, so let's wrap this episode up here, and in the next one we'll come back and we'll start to implement the search function here that'll allow you to search and get suggestions with an autocomplete for towns and cities and locations, and you can click on that and we'll have the map bring you to it. So that'll be next time on this series. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you in that next video.